Yo guys, it's slyroh. You already know that today I am going to be bringing you my character ranking for Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair. I just finished playing the game, and as promised, I'm going to rank all of the characters in the game from my least favorite to my favorite. As I just stated, this list is taking place right after playing Danganronpa 2, so I know that these characters, or at least some of these characters, show up in future Danganronpa games, but this is only taking into consideration the game of Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. That is the only information that I have right now, so that is what I'm going off of. Obviously, this is going to spoil the game, so if you do not know all of the details about the game and the characters, make sure that you go play it yourself, watch my playthrough, anything like that before I spoil everything for you. I'm probably also going to end up spoiling plenty of the first game as well, but if you already know enough about the second game, I assume you know enough about the first game. That's all the information that I'm working with, and that is what I'm going to be using to make my ranking here. Obviously, this list is just my opinion, and I know that every character has something to offer to somebody, so some characters are going to relate to some people more than others, so these are the characters that relate to me. I generally judge based on how interesting I find them, how much I'm rooting for them, and how much I just generally like their personality. So that is the criteria that I go with, and yeah, feel free to let me know your favorite characters in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's go ahead and get on with the list. Starting off the list with my least favorite character in the game, it is Hiyoko Sayanji, the ultimate traditional dancer. I did not like the character that she sort of became. She started out kind of funny. I was sort of into this sort of sociopathic, like, child character that liked squishing ants and had some really funny lines. But the fact that she sort of just became meaner and like all of her stuff was just directed at other people, she would just bully other people, and then she never really got any sort of redemption. Even as I learned about her backstory, I'm just like, this doesn't really excuse like the behaviors that she has around other people, especially when there's no acknowledgement of her doing anything wrong or anything like that. There's no acknowledgement of herself being mean to other people. There's no real sign of her wanting to change, and then obviously she just dies and there's just no going up from there. So she definitely ended off as my least favorite character, despite not starting out that way. I thought she had really good potential, but she really just offered nothing redeeming for me, and I do not really enjoy her. Number 15 is the character that I thought was going to be my least favorite, and that's Teru Teru. Teru Teru to me is just basically like a joke character that's kind of hard to take seriously. I mean, he looks ridiculous, he sounds ridiculous, he has to make some sort of perverted joke at every, turn. His entire backstory, like in terms of his free time events, are about him forgetting where he came from or who he is, I guess, and there are things there, like obviously like the backstory scene of him with his mom in the diner, and how he like wants to make her proud and all that good stuff, but that's like the only good thing, and there's not enough of his character that's like serious enough to really keep that emotion at all. So I think if you like Teru Teru, you probably just find the joke funny, and while it can be, it's also just like, I prefer characters that have a more well-rounded personality or just have more to them than just like, oh look, this is a joke character that we made so we can have him be the first killer and then less people will be upset. Because oh my gosh, imagine having Teru Teru like throughout the entire game. That would be awful, especially if he never grew or changed, which it didn't seem like he was going to. Oh, that would be the worst. But thankfully we didn't have to deal with that, so because of those two things, Teru Teru lands at 15 and not the very bottom. Coming in at number 14, and this is going to be pretty quick, is Myru. I just find Myru to be so boring and like kind of forgettable. She is very bland to me. She doesn't really have like a strong personality. I guess she has sort of like a motherly protective aura to her, but in a cast of characters that all are very like extreme personalities and are very over the top, Myru is very like reserved and just there. Her backstory didn't really add that much for me that I cared all that much about. I just was never invested in her. I remember when I walked in and saw Myru dead, I was just like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'd rather her die than like almost anybody else at this point, because I just don't really care that much about her. So yeah, she just does nothing for me. She's kind of boring, and she also had a lot of bringing up like, oh, you're a man, you need to do this. You're you need to do this because you're a man. And I generally don't like stuff like that. I mean, I'm not one that cares all that much for, like, gender roles. I understand it's a Japanese game and they care more for that, but, like, Myru, like, really hammered that in with, like, every other line she was saying to me. And it was kind of annoying, so, yeah, I don't really like Myru, so, bleh. Continuing on with characters that I still don't really like that much, number 13 is Kazuichi. I can see an argument for, Kazuichi being a pretty good character. His backstory was at least pretty cool, as you can see that he's, like, not very trusting of other people because of what happened to him with his friend basically, like, snitching on him and, like, blaming everything on him and then just not talking to him anymore. And, that's kind of rough. There is some pretty cool things to him. I also find his reactions to certain things really funny. Like, his screams when things happen are really funny. I got a good chuckle out of him just, like, freaking out over things. But the thing that puts him lower here is his sort of obsession with Sonia, which is very unhealthy and very weird. And, like, nobody calls him out on it. He doesn't get, like, checked on it. I don't say, like, nobody calls him out, but people will be like, Kazuichi, that's, gross, or that, you shouldn't say that. But, like, he doesn't change. He doesn't, like, acknowledge that anything he's doing is wrong. And, again, it's just, like, a character that's kind of stagnant in that specific sense, where he doesn't really grow or acknowledge that, like, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't, like, use verbiage like you are obsessed with a woman. And, I don't know. It's very weird. It's very uncomfortable. I don't like it, and it kept happening the entire time, the whole way through. There was no growth from it. And so that's going to keep him down here. I think he had potential to be higher, but, like, that one thing really, really almost ruined his character for me. But everything else about him is pretty cool. All right, we are getting closer to characters that I like, but we're still not quite there. Number 12 is going to be Akane. Akane is pretty interesting, I guess, in terms of her gut instinct is pretty fun. And sometimes she's just so stupid to the point that it's funny. But she's also just, like, really stupid. Like, and it's, like, it's, like, not really believable. You know what I mean? I think the thing that, like, really did it for me is just, like, at every chance, like, she was given to react to something, her first instinct was always be like, oh, I'm gonna kill him, I'm gonna go fight Monokuma, I'm gonna go choke Nagito out. It's just, like, Akane should not have survived to the end of the game. Like, there's no way. The amount of times that she had, like, the intent to kill and, like, had to be stopped by other people and not her own restraint, she doesn't really, like, learn or grow from that. I don't know. It's just a mixture of, like, her not really using her brain literally ever, and she's just very focused on, like, fighting. I'm just like, none of that does anything for me. I guess the one good thing she has is I do like her backstory and how she had to survive and had to take care of all of her siblings and things like that. It's very interesting, and it does make sense and kind of contextualize, like, why she's willing to do so many things to survive. But I don't know. I was just really put off that, if she wants to, like, survive so bad, why is her first instinct to, like, kill when she knows that, like, that would get her killed and then she wouldn't survive? And then, I don't know. It's, she just didn't really do that much for me. So, yeah. Coming in at number 11 is going to be Makomaru. It's kind of a similar story where, like, he has, like, one main personality trait, which is that he likes to talk about bodily functions, which, if that is your biggest personality trait, then you really got some work to do. He has a more interesting personality in terms of the fact that he uses his brain a little bit more. I also did love his backstory as to why he became a team manager and things like that. I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, him putting himself in front of Akane, literally sacrificing himself, and he only got to come back because of Monokuma magic, and then got to be Makomaru, which, that was really fun. He has a better personality for sure. He's more likable, I guess. But there's still not the same kind of depth to him that I would have liked. And again, he would stay silent a lot, and then when he would speak up, it's just like, oh, let me talk about bodily functions, and I'm like, oh, cool. I'd love to hear you talk about that. Not. So yeah, as you can tell, this cast of characters were a little bit weaker to me, especially on the lower end, but we are getting to characters that I like here very, very soon. Don't you worry. Coming in at number 10 is who I thought was going to end up being my favorite character based on just design alone, and that is Pekko. I think Pekko looks so cool. I love the, like, silver hair with the bamboo sword, and she's just very, like, tough. She's just really good. We finally made it to a character that I just like. The only thing that really holds Pekko back is that she just wasn't around for very long, and she wasn't super prominent when she was there. Because she's not a super outspoken personality, she's a little bit more reserved. You don't hear from her a ton, so she didn't have as much time to really put a stamp on her personality. But I do like her sort of backstory stuff, and, you know, her main thing is trying to get her to smile, and her thinking about Fujiko and all that stuff. It's very, very cool, in the way that she, like, went out, trying to protect Fujiko. Yeah, I really like all that stuff together a lot, but I think Pekko, just by herself, there just wasn't as much time for her to shine as there was for a lot of the characters that are higher. So I couldn't put Pekko much higher, but I really thought based on design that she would be like my favorite, and by design she still is probably up there for one of my favorites. She's really, really good. There is a big jump in quality now that we've reached the top 10. Coming in at number 9, I have gone back and forth with where I wanted to put this character. She ended up as high as the top 5. I thought she was going to end up as low as the bottom 5. But at number 9 is going to be Mikan. Mikan is very interesting to me because I think she is someone that you inherently root for because she is soft-spoken, she is getting bullied in front of your face by Hiyoko constantly, which is something that she's used to experiencing. I really was interested in her specific free time event where she states that this situation that she's in is much better than her home situation, which is crazy. That she prefers being in, like, this death battle game than being back at home being bullied by, like, all the other kids and whatnot. But she has a very interesting mindset with, it seems like she prefers that over not being remembered or known by, like, anybody. She's a very interesting character. I really didn't like, in the moment, her sort of personality switch when it turns out that she was the killer. But after everything has been explained, I think that is a lot better. However, it's still not great, but it's not as bad as I thought it was the first time through. But Mikan is still a very interesting character, but she still has a few intricacies that are just not super for me. So she ended up right here in the middle, but I do like Mikan a lot. Now, for number 8, I had a really tough time with this, and this is the character that made me realize why this list was really hard to put together, because number 8 is Shiaki. And I'm not gonna lie, up until the last chapter, I was for sure locked in. Shiaki was going to be my number 1 favorite character of the whole game. She really was. But the fact that she's not a real person really does strip the human element when you compare her to the other characters. The other characters, I'm so much more interested in learning their backstories, where they came from, what their home life is like, how they've, you know, grown up, and things like that. And Shiaki just doesn't have any of that. You know, she's a program, and her life is just not the same. And so when I'm looking at, you know, what did everybody come from, how has everybody's surroundings shaped who they are now, Shiaki doesn't quite have that, and I was really sort of let down by that. I really wanted her to be a real person that just happened to be on the Future Foundation's side, but she's not. She's just programmed to be a guardian, or whatever the title is, to sort of watch over and help all of the remnants of despair. And yeah, that really sort of weakened her as a character for me. So when I'm talking about just characters, I have to put Shiaki lower, even if it all does make sense and it is all good. I am just more interested in the backstories of other characters than I am in Shiaki, and that's really, really sad because she had one of my favorite personalities. I love characters that are very analytical. Shiaki was always very calm and thought things through, and I just love that in characters more than the ones that generally overreact and don't think. So I really thought Shiaki was going to end up way higher, but the end of the game sort of left her as a character in a bit of a weaker state for me compared to the others. Number 7 for me is a very big surprise, as it is Byakuya Togami, also known as Tugami, also known as the Ultimate Imposter. I am just so interested in the Ultimate Imposter's life and how they came to be, how they admire whoever they admire and become whoever they want to become. I found it very interesting that it seems like the ultimate imposter's only real personality trait is that they like to eat a lot of food. So, and they sort of use that as a way to show their own personality, because outside of that, they have to take the identity of somebody else to really sort of be recognized in any sort of sense. And I just find that to be so interesting. I would not have put Byakuya up nearly this high based on just what I got in the story, and this is why you look at the free time events and play through, for me, it was playing through the island mode and just learning it over time. It was just really interesting to me, and I am just so fascinated at the existence of the ultimate imposter that, I just had to put them this high. So that's really all I have about that. If you watched my character ranking video for the characters in Danganronpa 1, you would know that I don't generally super connect to protagonists very much when compared to characters that you can learn a lot more about. But this game really surprised me, as number 6 is going to be Hajime, the protagonist of Danganronpa 2. My main problem with the first game is that Makoto was very much sort of like an everyman that any player of a video game could just put themselves into. But with Hajime, he felt like a character. He felt like his own character that I just happened to be seeing. He had his own strong opinions that sometimes were very different with what I thought, and I couldn't change that because I was the player. I just had to be like, oh, this is what Hajime thinks, and I'm controlling Hajime. Therefore, that is just how it works. He just felt a lot more strong-headed and more of a character than I'm used to for a protagonist in these types of games. Obviously, the reveal of Hajime being Izuru Kamakura was mind-blowing to me, and it was not something that I ever thought about, and that just gives Hajime even more of an interesting backstory and something that he has to deal with. He had to really struggle with that decision of wait a minute, if I undo this and I become that being or person again, is that for the best? Is it not? And there's just so many things that you have to watch Hajime sort of grapple with as he's making these decisions, and they're not as simple as you as the player just oh, we'll make the decision that saves everyone. It's Hajime has his own things to worry about, and I really found it interesting. I think Hajime is a fantastic protagonist and a fantastic character, and I am surprised at how much I really, really enjoyed him, and learning all about what he has to bring to the table, and the fact that he wasn't just a nobody that just happened to show up so he can be the protagonist. I just really, really liked him a lot. Moving on to the top 5, number 5 is going to be Ibuki, and Ibuki's great. Everybody loves Ibuki. She's very fun. She's very energetic. There's really not much more than that. I mean, you see Ibuki. She is who she says she is, and that is all to her. If you like the over-the-top, energetic, fun personality that's Ibuki, then you love Ibuki. And if you don't, well, then I'm sorry, your life is probably not as good as it could be, because you need an Ibuki in your life. She is so much fun. She's great. I love the musician stuff. I love all the free time events where you're kind of jamming out with her, and she just makes you do all this crazy stuff. She doesn't have as much of her own stuff to get through, and I think it's very interesting that her free time events are more trying to help Hajime get through the stuff that he needs to get through. And I just find Ibuki very interesting. She always had fun little quips. She always popped up and you knew something fun was going to happen. So there's really not much more to it than that. I think Ibuki's very fun. I think she's great. I was very sad when she didn't make it, but they can all live in the end. So sad. But Ibuki's great. This whole top 5 is very, very fantastic, and ordering it was a chore, let me tell you. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Sonia. I love Sonia so much. Sonia is very interesting in just the fact that she is a princess from another country that is just coming to be a student and learning about, other things. Yeah, she is such an interesting personality with her interest in, dramas and, ghost stuff, and she's just, not as fazed by, everything going around her. I thought it was really interesting in the free time events where you sort of see that, she is more about putting a brave face in front of everybody else, because that's sort of what she's used to. As the princess and next ruler of a country, she has to be the strong face so her people don't get scared. And she was sort of carrying that through the game as well, and she doesn't really get that much of a chance to really break down and show her real emotions, but you do get to see that, and I think that is also really interesting. I also just think Sonia has some really fun quips and things like that. She's just a really sort of down-to-earth person, but is still very quirky, and it's just someone I loved spending time with and being around. I think Sonia was great. I'm so happy that she made it to the end, because I did not really think that she would. I thought there was no way that both Sonia and Kazuichi would make it to the end, and I definitely thought Sonia was going to be the one to go. So I'm very happy that she somehow got to stay alive, and yeah, it was pretty great. I love Sonia. Now I gotta say, while this list was in general very hard to put together, these top 3, it was insane to order them. All 3 of these characters have spent time as my number 1, they spent time at 2 and 3, and I keep reordering them nonstop. And if you ask me another day, the order would probably change again. But as of right now, I am going to say that my 3rd favorite character in Danganronpa 2 is Nagito. I almost put Nagito at number 1. He was there for a long time. He is so interesting, and that's what I like, is interesting characters. His life is full of having bad things happen to him, and then having even better things happen to him, to then have even worse things happen to him. And it's just this constant cycle of how do you live like that? And it sort of gives context to the way that he was acting early in the game when you don't really understand. Once you see all the free time events and you understand his mindset, it just makes sense as to what he's doing. He is very much just a chaotic person that you don't know what he's going to do, and that just makes it super interesting. I think he's just such a good personality. I think he has such a ridiculously interesting backstory, and I'm so interested to see what he's doing at every given moment. So I had to put Nagito here. I think once I finally understood everything that he's been through and does, I mean, he's basically playing this game, you know, with this, like, tumor or whatever, that he doesn't even have that long to live, and he's just trying to do whatever he can and hope that the best thing possible for the world just happens before he dies. So it's just so interesting. I think Nagito is so great, but I had to keep him at 3 because I think the other 2 are just slightly more well-rounded, maybe. It's hard to say what they do better, but I'm gonna do my best to explain. Number 2 might come as a shock to some people, as my number 2 is Gundam. Gundam, I think, has the best personality. I think Gundam is so much fun. Gundam has great antics. He's so funny. Anytime he says be happy, I get a big smile on my face. There were so many times where I stopped talking so I could just hear him say his, canned repeated lines. Everything he says is so good. I think the only thing that holds Gundam back from being my absolute favorite character is I really, really wanted to sort of understand what made him the way he is in terms of why he talks the way he does. And I don't know that I ever really got that. I really wanted just, like, the full backstory of, like, this is, like, what happened, and I did not quite get that. I also just have a hard time sort of deciphering his word codes, so that is one thing holding him back. And also, his, like, trial was interesting, but when he went out, they sort of built this up as, like, oh, Gundam made this ultimate sacrifice by committing a murder, and he did it for everybody else, but he also basically committed almost the perfect murder, and if he didn't do, like, one little slip-up, I think he would have gotten away with it, and he didn't really make it seem like there was any intention that he was ever going to, like, throw himself under the bus to save everybody else. So I don't generally buy the narrative of, like, oh, he sacrificed himself for everybody. So that was a weird, tonal conflict within, like, the game's story, which it might be less on Gundam and more on the story itself. But that's another thing that was just like, I don't think Gundam is super nice, and he's super caring, and he's super compassionate, but also he did almost get away. He probably got the closest to getting away with a crime here. Yeah, so there was that, but I mean, obviously Gundam is great. I love all of his stuff there, but yeah, it's not gonna be number 1. Instead, what the number 1 character is, it's Fujiko. I cannot believe I'm saying this. If you told me in the first chapter of the game that Fujiko would even be in consideration for a top 10 character, let alone a top 5 character, let alone my favorite, I would have laughed in your face. I'd have been like, there's no way. This dude sucks. He curses and just yells at everybody that talks to him. He doesn't want to be a part of any sort of group thing. He's just annoying, and he's awful. But then he is the one character that goes through such a tremendous growth throughout the main narrative of the game. he loses the person that is closest to him, the person that he grew up with, his protector. And he doesn't have that. His protector, his best friend, his love interest, whatever you want to make it out to be, he loses that in front of him. And he almost, I don't know if he was like truly intending to kill himself in front of everybody to sort of atone for his sins, but that was unsuccessful, and that turns out to be the best thing, because he ends up learning to move on and sort of take what Pekko did as a sort of sacrifice and just use that as that shouldn't be in vain and I need to move forward. And he just becomes so much better. There is a bit of him being a little naive where he can still sometimes think that like the best things are going to happen if he just believes in it. Like towards the end, he is very focused on trying to just like, oh, everybody can be revived. We need to do that. I don't care what happens. And isn't always the most logical, but he's just so interesting. He had the best character growth, and as of right now, this very moment, I have to say that he's my favorite character. That could be a testament to the fact that there's just a lot of good characters, but without another, like, overly, I didn't have one other character that is like, this is my favorite. Shiaki would have been that, but, she sort of faltered toward the end, and Fujiko is there to just be the best character. I don't think that there's really any negatives that I can say. He had the best character growth from start to finish, and the fact that he got to survive and he gets to keep moving on is just so fantastic, and I love that for him. So I'm so interested to see what happens with Fujiko in the future, and I'm just so happy for everything that he's been through up to this point. So that is, that's going to be my list. That is my list of all of the characters from Danganronpa 2. This list may change in the future depending on what details come out about these characters in the upcoming games. But if you did enjoy this, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. I am going to be continuing to play more Danganronpa games. There's going to be so much Danganronpa content. It's going to be crazy. So hopefully y'all enjoyed. Leave your favorites, least favorites, your opinions on my list in the comments, and I will see y'all around. Thank you so much for watching. And until the next time, peace out.